Hello, welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Congress continuing its probe into the origins of the CCP virus. Senator Roger Marshall releasing a Senate report on the origins of COVID-19, concluding there could have been 2 lab leaks, but key data points still missing. Lawmakers tell us the intel community is holding back. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more from Capitol Hill.
3 years after the deadly CCP virus swept the globe, killing more than 6 million people worldwide, researchers, scientists, and lawmakers are still grappling with the reality that they do not know how this virus originated. But in a rare expression of bipartisanship, both Democrats and Republicans agree that it's crucial to get to the bottom of it and agree that there's a lack of transparency and accountability.
If you have nothing to cover up, why are you covering it up? The fact that we have the CCP in coercion with the WHO and Wuhan lab all still covering this up with no transparency means we should have zero funding for that.
China has not been forthcoming. I think all 3 witnesses would agree to that.
And actually, the Chinese embassy tried to stop today's hearing. An email we received from Chairman Winstrup's office said that the Chinese embassy here in the U.S. emailed him encouraging him to cancel today's hearing. Meanwhile, other lawmakers tell us they're concerned that our own intelligence community is holding back. Take a look.
They're pretty much designed to protect the government that they serve, and I think their unwillingness to reveal the true information means that they're helping cover up something.
Our very government that the taxpayers are funding was complicit in spreading misinformation that could have saved lives.
And this is actually a similar conclusion that we heard from Senator Marshall just yesterday when he released a 300-page report after 18 months of investigations into this. In a briefing with reporters, he told us that he and his team have had a very difficult time getting certain information from the intelligence community. I asked the senator specifically what information they still need. He said everything instead of just bits and pieces. For example, he said they've had a difficult time getting certain classified documents that they otherwise would be entitled to. And he mentioned that they're missing key data points that could actually help them prove what they concluded in that report. That is that there were actually possibly 2 lab leaks from Wuhan, but he says all of this is still inconclusive with a lack of that information. Senator Marshall says they still have a ton of unanswered questions that they're looking into, such as where tax money is going with regards to grants that are given for research purposes, as well as if the NIH had any way to monetize the vaccines, and also why the NIH decided to change the definition of gain-of-function research. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The Department of Justice is taking action against Chinese espionage. Retired senior intelligence officer Nicholas F Temiaris joins us to discuss a dark secret revealed by the FBI. Nicholas F Temiaris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, Nicholas, 2 individuals arrested in connection to a Chinese police station operating right here in the United States. What do you think the purpose of this illegal police station was in Lower Manhattan, and do more exist?
Well, let's start out with the purpose first. China feels threatened, the CCP in particular feels threatened by dissidents abroad. So they move very aggressively against nonprofit organizations, they move against democracy advocates, they move against Falun Gong, they move against the Uyghurs, any organizations abroad, particularly if those individuals are organized. The CCP perceives them as a threat. So they go out to disrupt their activities. They go out to infiltrate and report on their activities. They go out to collect intelligence so that they can threaten family members back home. So a very, very aggressive program to quell any type of dissent against the CCP that might exist worldwide. And the extent to which they do this is unbelievable. They've done it in Sweden with a Tibetan population of 92, and yet the Swedes arrested multiple intelligence assets for the Ministry of State Security reporting and trying to disrupt the activities of 92 people, half of them being children. So, yeah, it really shows something extraordinary. Are there more? Yeah, most certainly. There are over 100 worldwide. I would expect at least a couple more in the United States. And I think it probably should be running for cover at this point.
Well, that brings me to my next question, Nicholas. Whose job is it to actually protect our country and people in our country from these types of things?
Well, this comes under statutes of Foreign Agents Registration Act, where individuals are acting on behalf of the Chinese government or the party and not registering it. So they're doing it covertly. So this is what we would define in an overall sense as a covert action. And that is the FBI's job. This is the FBI's job to move against them. Of course, when they threaten individuals, as they have done on many, many occasions, they break a whole nother series of laws, which could even be addressed at the state or local levels. So there's enough in law enforcement to go around, but primarily, and we see the FBI now taking responsibility for these actions and moving against them, but they have been going on for quite some time.
As you mentioned, this has been going on for quite some time to various groups, including the Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, all different dissident communities overseas. Do you think that our agencies like the FBI understand this, or to the extent that it is happening?
I think to be honest, I think for a lot of years they just didn't care. I mean, these things were very much kept inside the Chinese community, amongst the Chinese diaspora. It was a threatened population, but it didn't compare to organized crime or drugs or multi-billion-dollar drug busts. So it wasn't addressed as a primary responsibility. Now China has emerged as a national security threat. And as part of this national security threat, we clearly see how they have reached into American society and to American lives, people who are living here. So that's got the Bureau responding.
And do you think that these arrests will be enough to actually deter the CCP? Or what more, or is there more that you think can and should be done?
Well, the U.S. response to these situations is typically a law enforcement response and try to arrest your way out of it. And we're not going to do that. You just can't make enough arrests, overall that'll make a difference on this. So our government has to be a little more strategic in pointing out to the CCP this isn't going to be tolerated, in implementing a process of deterrence, right? How do you create a situation where it works against the CCP to do this, where the United States, through a policy mechanism, takes action every time some of these incidents occur, so that you raise the cost to the CCP of doing it? Because now there virtually is no cost. A couple of people got arrested in New York. That's it. That's not much of a cost to pay for the hundreds or thousands that they could have impacted while they were running this operation in New York City.
Nicholas F Temiaris, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks. Always a pleasure to be here.
High crime in New York City. Republicans attribute it to the policies of Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. Is there merit to the accusations? Joining us next to discuss, we have New York City Councilmember Robert Holden. New York City Councilmember Bob Holden, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Councilmember, if I could ask you, the House Judiciary Committee yesterday holding a hearing in New York City highlighting the rise in crime in your beloved city. Was this politics or justified?
Well, it depends on if you're a Democrat or Republican. The Democrats felt it was politics. The Republicans felt it was really about the issues, about lawlessness that we're seeing on the streets of New York City and particularly in Manhattan.
And if I could ask you, why do you think we're seeing such a rise in crime lately?
Well, in New York State, we're seeing it because of bail reform and discovery laws that went into effect about 2019. But then it also, after the George Floyd incident, the murder, things went south, disrespect for police, just a general lawlessness that we saw throughout the nation. But it's more disturbing for us in New York City. We have 8.5 million people and a very, very, kind of tight quarters and within the city. And so everything is magnified, of course, in New York City.
So you obviously have your finger on the pulse of your city. You mentioned the police force there. If you could kind of give us an idea of what you're hearing from them, their state of mind and morale, if you will.
Yeah, they're totally demoralized. So many have quit, retired, quit, My niece, who was a cop for 7 years in Brooklyn, she just quit. She couldn't take it anymore. You get, so certainly you're under a microscope every minute of the day. You're second guessed all the time. And then the politicians, including many of my colleagues in the city council, keep putting more and more laws into effect and really making them, under, like I said, under the microscope constantly. And it's too much pressure, a lot of pressure on these officers. And for low pay, they don't get that. Their starting salary in New York now, I think, is like $42,000. You can't live in New York City on that.
You sure can't. If I could ask you, when it comes to the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, why do you think he's downgrading charges for criminals throughout the city, from felonies to misdemeanors and beyond, yet becoming extremely creative in upgrading misdemeanors to felonies for a former president?
Well, it's the woke mentality that we're seeing that's hard to figure out. I don't know how these individuals feel that they're doing a great job by letting people, like let's say a knife point robbery. He thinks that's a minor offense. Low-level burglaries, he calls them. If somebody breaks into your house, is that a low-level crime? Commercial burglaries are through the roof here. Stores now, our drug chains are locking everything up constantly because of the theft. It's just unbelievable. And if there were, in the 80s, I went through a high crime period. We all did. Rudy Giuliani was able to fix that from 92, through the 90s. And we became like the safest big city in America. And Michael Bloomberg continued that. Only Mayor de Blasio unraveled that within his 8 years. And, now we're trying to get back to sanity in New York City, but it's a tough road when you're going to have DAs like Alvin Bragg kind of letting it, resisting arrest, he even says he's not going to prosecute. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's unbelievable too when you talk about burglaries. I mean, that's a serious crime, being held at knife point. You would think there should be stricter punishment rather than lightening those. If I could just lastly ask you, how different were the policies under somebody like former Mayor Giuliani compared to the current situation? And is there a correlation directly to the rise in crime and those policies?
Well, Rudy Giuliani turned around this city. It started a little bit in the last couple of years of David Dinkins, but Giuliani continued it. And what they did is there was a thing called personal responsibility. You did a crime, you shot a gun off, you would go to jail. And that's the difference here. Now, the crooks don't fear going to jail. Most of them don't. The vast majority don't. We had an individual, he shot a gun 5 times in a 2-year period, and he's still out on the loose. So if New York City has tough gun laws, why aren't we enforcing them? Where are our DAs? Where's the judges? This is insane. So it's really a difference in mentality of leadership. It means if somebody does something, they're responsible, they go to jail, or at least they should. Now it's not happening.
New York City Councilmember Bob Holden, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.